Okay, let's look into Chapter 6 and talk about absorption costing versus variable costing. So if we look at our slide here, we'll find that absorption costing is very similar to variable costing with one exception, in that fixed manufacturing overhead has been put into the product cost and away from the period costs. So really the period costs are only our variable sales and administrative functions and our fixed sales and administrative functions, and the rest of it is all going to product cost. So what impact would that have on a income statement, for example? If we look at the example here under unit cost comparisons, we can see that the Harvey Corporation produces a single product. Its variable cost per unit has direct materials, labor, and variable manufacturing overhead of $10, selling administrative expenses of $3, manufacturing overhead of $150, selling and administrative expenses of $100. If we go to the next slide, we'll see the unit product cost is determined by, of course, the direct materials, labor, and variable manufacturing overhead. That's the same for both, $10 each. But we add the fixed manufacturing overhead. The fixed manufacturing overhead of $150,000 divided by the number of units, which is 25,000, for $6 a unit to get a unit production cost of $16 per unit. So you can see we've just taken the fixed overhead and put it into the product itself. Now this can create differences in the income statements and profitability of the company. For example, if the units aren't sold, the cost of goods sold would not reflect that fixed overhead in absorption costing. In variable costing, the fixed overhead would be absorbed as a period cost, and so therefore you could inflate your profitability numbers by using absorption costing, or your profitability numbers, I shouldn't say inflated, you would represent higher profitability numbers under absorption costing, because if the units stay in inventory, they wouldn't hit cost of goods sold, and therefore you wouldn't have them in the period in which you're in. So we look at the difference between absorption costing and variable costing, and the big difference is that the fixed manufacturing overhead goes into product cost, not into period cost. So if it's not included in the period that if the products aren't sold in the period that they were made, it wouldn't be on the income statement. So that's a big difference between the two. Let's keep looking at this.